remote.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Don, the remote.
Yeah, we're going to get a picture here. So, well, let you talk first.
Alrighty. Yeah, we're with well, do it when we do the presentation, but yeah, okay. Yeah, we're with Foothills Kiwanis Club of Boulder Valley. It's a typical, well, no, we're not typical. We're one of the good ones, service organizations in the area. And we meet Monday mornings at the brew house that I'd like to have you join us at 95th and Arapahoe.
They brew coffee.
Yeah, they brew, yeah, right. Thanks for the, it is, and Mike has presented multiple times at our club. One of our major projects is providing service dogs to young children with childhood diabetes, and we provide the puppies at 7 weeks old, and then train the puppies and the family for about a 2-year period until they're mature and graduated as service dogs, and they alert the kids for going into low blood sugar. And it's amazing. They actually, it's really unbelievable, but they can alert sometimes before the medical things alert. So they'll let the parents or the child know that whoops, your blood sugar is diving down before the medical alert systems go off. And our programs generally support children. We're going to present a check here today. We would, not mandatory, we would recommend it goes to the youth education programs. Your Foot Locker deal is really a super program. And incidentally, providing those dogs and our other programs are mostly youth related. We are in the middle of our major fundraiser. If you own a dog and are proud of your dog and think it's the coolest dog in the Front Range, pick up one of these and you can nominate your dog for $10 online. Get all your friends to vote $1 per vote. And this contest goes until September 20th. And the winner then gets to name a beer, whatever you want to name. You pick out the beer from Bambi Brewing over in Superior, and you also get the dog's picture, and the top 7 winners get their picture on the can of beer and stuff. So pick one of these up, and
the top 12 get a very nice glossy 2027 calendar, very dog themed. The pictures of the top 12 dogs will be for each month. It's pretty cool.
So we do quite a few projects like that. Those of you that might buy groceries, the King Super over here, 136th, over by Legacy High School, you'll see one of us. We ring the Salvation Army bell there from Thanksgiving till Christmas. So if you stop by and see somebody ringing the bell, I'm smiling because my wife for many years during that period of time, she would say that I proved that I'm a real ding-a-ling. So anyway, what we'd like to do today is make a presentation to John. This is our president, Mike. Okay.
Thank you so much. We'll take a picture here.
Be shaking hands again, Mike.
Oh, there we go.
Around next.
You bet.
Sorry, there you go.
There we go. There we go.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Cheese.
Jeez.
I'm watching the edge of the cloth.
All righty.
There you go. Very good.
I'd like to have it go to
I'm
the,
going to take Mike.
oh,
Not that I could do anything.
yeah, I'd like to recommend that it go to youth education with, but, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the Kiwanis, Foothills Kiwanis Club. And we will use this for our education programs. Dave Little's not here today, but Dave Little is our education specialist. He's one of our paid contract staff, and he is the one that developed our Foot Locker program. Our Foot Locker program represents each conflict: World War II, World War I, Civil War. I think we're still building out the Civil War trunk or Foot Locker. So this will be very nice for us to help build that Foot Locker out. Those Foot Lockers go out to the local schools for educational purposes. So thank you very much on behalf of the museum. Thank you.
Let's have a hand for the Kiwanis, please.
while I've got the mic, I will make a quick mention, thinking about the Civil War. October 15th, put that on your calendar. It's a Thursday evening. We are going to have the grand opening of our new Civil War room. You can actually go up and look at it today, but the grand opening will be October 15th, Thursday evening. We're going to have food. We're going to have whiskey. Maybe we'll have some beer, I think. We have to get a special permit to do that. But we did this a couple of months ago, and it worked out really nice. So we're going to do that October 15th. Put that on your calendar, please. That's all I have.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. President. And along those lines, too, our new Civil War exhibit is something we are very proud of in our museum. Definitely encourage any of you, if you have not seen it, after the talk today, to go up there and take a peek at it. A certain portion of it, I would say maybe a considerable portion, was something that has been donated by our very own Bob Mulder, right over here. Bob, raise your hand if you would. There are some absolutely phenomenal artifacts that are up there that Bob has, and I definitely encourage you to take a look at those. I also encourage you to visit Bob's very own museum that he has at his home, the Civil War Annex, and we do have some of these flyers sitting over here on the table, but it is well worth the trip, having been through it myself. Bob has many more items there that are quite fascinating, Civil War and other conflicts related. So, all right, thank you very much. We have an announcement from our very own Tom Scholl. Tom, if you'll come up here. Tom's looking for some volunteers to help him.
Uh-oh.
Well, speaking of dates, September 15th, they are rededicating the memorials, the World War I memorial out on Arapahoe and Wadsworth. They have invited the Tiger team to be out there and represent the museum. So I would invite all of you that would be interested in that, come out on the 15th of September to the rededication of the World War I memorial. It's at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, unfortunately, on the 15th of September, I'm also scheduled for duty here. So I'm looking for a volunteer to take over my duties as the replacement here, because I will be out there with the Tiger team. So hope to see you out there or see you in here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So please get a hold of Tom if you feel you can help us out. You could volunteer for that event, September 15th. Lots going on in September and October. So once again, you might have heard me say many times about people here, our very own, I will describe them. And the reason why is because I truly believe that it is the members of this museum. It is our volunteers. It is members of our board. It is the people like you who are members who really make this place run. And we are kind of like a family in that aspect, if you ask me. All of us. So I'm going to encourage, once again, any of you who have connections to companies, corporations, we would love to talk to you about any sort of donations, any sort of volunteer work that could coincide with the museum. We have some great sponsors as it is. Lamar's Donuts, as we know, Mike has been bringing those in for us on a regular basis for coffee and conversation. So if you like those donuts, thank Mike, but also thank Lamar's. So they have been donating those for quite some time, right, Mike? So, yep. Veterans Life magazine, we've got a great relationship with them, and we have some of the latest copies. Those are free copies. I encourage you to pick those up and take a gander through some of those issues. Exhibits right now, as I mentioned, the Civil War exhibit upstairs, and our great addition to that collection, the General or Colonel, depending on the time period, John P. Slow uniform. That is an original. So recommend you go up there and take a look at that after the talk today. World War II artists in our artillery hallway. We have artists from World War II. I think everybody there from, I think even, who was the famous, Bill Maudlin, right? I think he did some sketches up there too, yeah. Upcoming coffee and conversation talks. September 12th, Colleen Sawyer. She has, probably some of you have seen her here before at the museum. She portrays very famous women from history. She will be portraying Frances Perkins, the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet with FDR's cabinet. 26 September, Tom Lindahl will talk about the autonomous battlefield. So those of you interested in artificial intelligence and what role it is playing in military technology right now and in modern warfare, that's a good one for you to see. October 10th, we have another gentleman from CMH, David Manley, who I think is he here?
Right there.
David, there you are. David has a very interesting exhibit he's going to show us too on the Battle of Kings Mountain, and he'll be talking about that. That was a very famous Revolutionary War battle. October 24th, Joseph Quinn, who is here too. Where's Joseph? There he is back there. It's going to be talking about maritime law and freedom of navigation in the seas. Ooh. So that should be interesting, especially with a lot of stuff that's been going on in the news lately. So I encourage you to be there for that one. A couple of reminders, if you have not signed in on one of our visitor logs, either downstairs or upstairs, please do so. Keeping a head count, so to speak, of who visits the museum really helps us out. If you would please silence or turn off your phone for the duration of John's talk today, just as a courtesy. Again, I encourage you to become a museum member. You can talk to any of us here wearing a vest, red or blue, and we can set you up with that. Your donations make this museum possible, so believe it or not, we have never turned away donations of money. All righty. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker today. Mr. John Carter, right over here, retired school teacher, taught 8th grade history for many years, so as you can imagine, I have interesting connection with him there. We can kind of relate. And John is also a member of Colorado Military Historians, which I am also a member of. A great club. I encourage some of you to come visit us sometime. And you can talk to any of us here, including our president, Greg Skelly, back there. Or David Manley back there if you're interested in coming and visiting and see what we do. All right? With that, I'm going to turn it over to John. John, make sure your volume's on.
Am I lit? Can you hear me?
All righty.
Good.
All right, John Carter.
Hold on one second. The great Italian director one time said, clap after I actually do something. So, okay. This program was originally developed so that I could show my 8th grade students in East Los Angeles how the revolution was fought, because they had no relation to it. And a lot of it is just plain counterintuitive. You know, it doesn't make any sense. We're going to be talking about tactics mostly, but it doesn't make any sense if we don't talk about strategy and actually national policy. And I stole this from the Naval Academy's history textbook. We have two countries we'll call red and green and blue. I'll let you decide who the good guys are on that one. But we start out here with the national policy, the national goals for each country. And if they're hostile, we're going to have a war. It's very important in that war to make sure that you know why you're there, so you know what the end goal is. If you wonder why we've had a little problem with our military history since World War II, almost invariably lack of an end goal. But then you get down to strategy. Strategy comes from a Greek word, strategos, which means the general or overall plan. So, for example, if we're going to take over Colorado, Denver would be a good place to start. It's where the headquarters is, and so we would attack towards that. But logistics goes right with it. If you don't have the beans and bullets, the strategy isn't going to happen. Tactics is where we actually get down to the battle, and that's where a lot of what we're going to talk about today. If the tactics don't fit your strategy, they're wrong. If your strategy doesn't fit your national policy, it's wrong. So you got to keep that in mind. I'm mentioning this in a talk that's mostly tactical because you'll see that these things are going to change a little as the war goes on. The 4 countries that are involved are going to change the way they do things a little bit. So, basic question that I used to ask my students, I'll ask you, since we have some combat veterans in here. If you are on a battlefield, would it be smarter to stand up or to lie down?
Lie down.
Mm-hmm. But if you're fighting with swords and spears, would it be smarter to stand up or to lie down? You see, in 1775, we only had a couple hundred years of fighting with firearms, not very good firearms. The history was mostly with swords and spears. And it was only about 100 years before that we got rid of the pike and actually made it into a bayonet and put it on the end of a musket. So by the Revolution, this is the weapon that's going to define our tactics, the musket. It's smooth inside, fires a ball that's more or less spherical. It's made extra large with a lot of windage because the powder creates a lot of crud in the barrel. And so you couldn't just, if you made it too fine, you couldn't drop the bullet in. You'd have to be ramming it down real hard. So what would happen is this. You're to load the musket. Picture a rather large Tootsie Roll sized cartridge. You bite the bullet off in your mouth. Tasty. Pour a little bit into this pan here. Pour the rest of the powder down the barrel. Spit in the bullet. Shove the paper in after. Take the ramrod out. Tamp it all down. Good man could do this in about 20 seconds for a while. So this was one of the things that was always startling to my students is that AK-47s do shoot a little faster. But so what happens when you fire? Well, a sixth of the time it doesn't even go off. But you bring it back to full cock, fire. The bullet goes down the barrel and it's bouncing down the barrel because of all that extra windage. So it actually takes its course from the last bounce. If I aim straight at you at 100 yards and you get hit, you are the unluckiest dude in the whole world. There are quotes about this from primary sources at the Battle of Waterloo and during the Revolution that make this very clear. 100 yards, almost impossible to get hit. Not impossible, you're in front of the gun. But ranges were normally inside about 50 yards. The musket is, in addition to being a firearm, it's a spear. And please notice the section of that. Don't worry, I won't. But thank you for ducking. The reason it's triangular, it's almost impossible to sew up a wound like that. So you thrust, twist, pull. It's an ugly thing. Lastly, it's also a club. So 2 parts of this are hand to hand.
And those things are way heavier than they look, because I got an opportunity to pick one up one time.
Actually, you know what I wish I could have done? The first year I did where rifles do play their part. The thing is that since it can't take a bayonet, they're very vulnerable to guys with bayonets. So at the Battle of Saratoga, you hear about Morgan's rifles. What you don't hear about is Dearborn's light infantry with bayonets protecting them, keeping the other guys away. So as always with tactics, where, for every idea you have, there's always something going that'll counter it. The last weapon we're going to talk about is cannons. Cannons fired solid iron balls, typically a 6-pound down to 3-pound ball, about the size of your fist. Hold that up against different parts of your body. And imagine yeah, not a good thing. What they would do is they'd actually bounce the ball in front of the regiment so that it would go flying through people, taking them down a file at a time. to be standing in front of cannon fire that you cannot reply to takes a lot of guts. As you get closer, they'll go to grape shot, where it's bundles of balls about this big. And then when they get closer even yet, it's canister, cans full of bullets. Great big shotgun. And they don't explode. Not contrary to Hollywood, if you can believe Hollywood got something wrong, they do not explode. The one, let's jump ahead so I can get you a picture here. Oh, be quiet. Pardon me. I set a timer and it decided to jump ahead on me. That was, my students always liked that. So we see the musket and the bayonet. Now, the way you're going to fight, since we are going to eventually come down to swords and spears, you're going to fight in line. The lines in Europe were typically 3 ranks deep, but in America they'll go down to 2. Notice, as you look at this, there is still some daylight for the bullets to pass through. You fired at the silhouette of the regiment, or the British did. Oh, thank you. I don't want them sliding off. Thank you. Firing at the silhouette of the regiment, fully 50% of the bullets would miss. So some of them are hitting. As you get closer and closer and closer, you actually march in fairly close, and only then do you fire. That first volley is very, very important. It was loaded while everything was quiet, while the gun was clean. Very important thing. So actually, believe it or not, on European battlefields, they'd march up to each other. One side would come up and said, "Oh, please do me the honor of firing first," so that they could march a little closer before they delivered their volley. A lot of strange stuff back then. So the strongest part of this formation is straightforward, but it could be a little vulnerable. So here's a smaller force of British. What you didn't want to have happen is to get hit in the flank. Because notice that only 2 or 3 guys are going to defend here against all these guys coming in. In fact, this regiment's going to take off. They're not going to stand and die. Even worse, getting hit from the rear, side rear, or the left rear, or the rear, pardon me. There. So what they tried to do is, battles are a lot about trying to achieve those things. And of course, it's kind of a dance. Some people were better at it than others. I'm going to just keep my notes with me. So, what kind of troops do we have? What I was just showing you were line infantry. I'm going to start with the British because they're the guys we got to beat, and they're the guys who Washington is going to try to imitate. The British regiments had 10 companies. 8 were foot companies or line companies. These were the regular guys who marched and fought in lines and columns and squares. They were doing all the things I just shared with you. But there were also some guys who were extra good. The shorter ones were put into the light infantry. These were guys who could skirmish. So in spite of all the stories about the British marching around in straight lines and letting us shoot at them from behind rocks and trees, they had skirmishers too, and they were good. But extra tall guys became grenadiers, and they were given a grenadier hat. Let me show you some pictures of this. The cannons. Pardon me, I forgot to mention the howitzer. It did fire an explosive shell. Interesting thing about it, for the longest time you had to reach down the cannon barrel to light the fuse on the shell. What could possibly go wrong? But by the Revolution, they're figuring out that you can fire it and the shell will go off. I kind of figured some Beetle Bailey kind of guy one time just decided to fire the doggone thing and forget about it. And it worked, and now he's trying to figure out how he tells Sarge, you know, we don't have to do that anymore. So these are, over here on your left, are British line infantry. Tricorn hats, red coats. You'll notice the different colors of the lapels and the cuffs. These tell you which regiment it is. A blue regiment is royal, so the colonel will be a member of the royal family. The queen, a princess, a prince. The guy who actually commands it is a lieutenant colonel who is tenant in lieu of the colonel's position. For the Grenadier Company, they're bigger guys, like I said, and they give them a bearskin to make them look even taller. These guys oftentimes were pulled, the companies were oftentimes pulled together in an army to form a battalion of elite troops. Good for assaults, also good as a reserve. And then over there on the left, we have the light infantry. Notice that they've cut their coats a little shorter so they can move through the woods more easily. And we have the Highlanders. Now, notice these guys are wearing the kilts, but those kilts were awfully warm in the humid back east, so they switched over to canvas trousers. One thing you're going to notice as I'm talking about this is soldiers are relentlessly practical. They will adapt to certain circumstances. Now, then we have the militia. Militia were the local boys. They oftentimes trained with a whiskey barrel. They would do a little shooting. They did not get very used to fighting in lines and columns, and you've got to be very confident to stand in line against a line of bayonets. When those bayonets get pointed at you, when you've got to the point they're going to charge, they say, you know, charge bayonets, hi! 400 guys doing that. Now, you're looking at them, and the battlefield is the loneliest place in the whole world, as a lot of you probably know. You feel like they're all looking at you. Seems like a good time to be elsewhere. And so the militia would take off. Israel Putnam said about the militia, he was a general in the war, if you protect their legs with a low wall, they'll stand and fight all day, like happened at Bunker Hill. If you give them a high wall where their heads are protected, they'll hunker down and won't fight at all. If you give them nothing at all, they'll run. And Washington's biggest problem in the early battles was he tried to maneuver militia on the battlefield against British soldiers. And that did not work out too terribly well. And last we have the cavalry. Notice the militia are kind of dressed, however, I mean, they're dressed in civilian clothes. Now, one of the things we're finding out, though, is that sometimes they maybe were a little bit better trained. At Lexington, and Concord, there were militia units that were moving in formation. It's something we're learning more about. Cavalry. Not much of it in the American Revolution, almost invariably light dragoons, which means they're supposed to be able to get off and fight on foot. The Americans had very little because they just couldn't afford it. The British tended, because they had to move by sea, they didn't know how to take care of horses on a boat. So you could follow a British convoy by the dead horses in the water. So they'd get where they were going and not have a whole lot of cavalry. They'd have to steal some local plugs. So you're not going to see a lot of cavalry action in this war. There's only one serious charge at the Battle of Camden, and that was devastating.
To whom?
The guys being charged. What it was is that the American army had broken down. It was routing. Okay, now it's dead forever. Pardon me. They were routing. Tarleton commanded some Tory cavalry of the British Legion. He charged and he ruthlessly pursued. He slaughtered that army. So this was the second American army that we lost in the South. And it was from there that we had to work to come back. Okay. On April 19, 1775, America went to sleep at peace. A British column marched out towards Lexington and Concord. This wasn't the first time this had happened. All the times previously, the militia kind of got in their way, and the British agreed to go home. In this case, all of Massachusetts woke up, and as the British moved along, they could hear the bells ringing behind them, beside them, and in front of them. As they put it, the country people are awake. They get to, Paul Revere gets to Lexington, the militia company comes out, they agree not to make or mix with the ministerial troops. But the next morning they're out there. Why? All I know is that Sam Adams met with their commander at midnight. No one knows what was said at that meeting, but there they were. Lexington and Concord and the Battle of Bunker Hill have given us a kind of a false impression about how the war was fought, because all that day, yes, the Americans did hide behind rocks and trees. Yes, they did come up and gun down the British. Two weird things. One is the British, if this is the column out in front of me, at the rear, here were the light infantry coming along like a fishing net, catching the Americans who came up too close to the British line. There were 40 American dead, 40 wounded. Normally you have 3 wounded for every 1 dead. The British were finishing people off. They were angry that day, which, of course, you're shooting at the king's colors. Who the heck are you? So they get back to Boston, and all of a sudden, here's this mob of militia around Boston. Not particularly well organized, but they're working on it. And so they decide to build a fortification on top of Bunker Hill. The British come over and very arrogantly decide to attack straight on. Bunker Hill is on a neck, if this is Bunker Hill, there's a neck that connects it to the mainland. All the British had to do is land back here, and they'd have captured all the Americans. But the British decided to just be arrogant. They march up the hill, and they are shot down for 2 waves. On the 3rd wave, the ammo ran out. And then the British got to play with their bayonets. But here's where things change. General Howe takes the army out of Boston, which was a lousy place for a base for the British. You know, no matter which way you went, you were blocked. There was just another hill. General Burgoyne said after Bunker Hill, well, hold it, there's just another hill there. We keep this up, we won't have an army. They'll just gun us down. So Howe takes the army up to Halifax. Howe had been the commander of the light infantry for the British in the 7 Years' War. He knew about fighting in America. So what he did was to teach them how to fight in the woods. Now, you guys have all had to do close order drill. Worry about this far apart, perhaps. As near as I can tell, it was kind of like dress right, dress distance, such that you could move through the woods, and if there's a tree here, you could step around it and keep going, and you could maintain formation. You could be close enough to protect your buddy on either side and be protected by him. And the British definitely got good at this. And this will affect things in the battles. Now, what I noticed, and this was one of the things that got me interested in this, was the textbooks that I read when I was a kid told us all about how the Americans were so good. They knew how to fight from behind rocks and trees. They knew the country. And yet Washington got kicked around for 2 years. What happened? Well, the thing is that Washington and his army were learning on the job. Like any of you who've been into combat, imagine trying to just learn on the job. Not a good way to learn. And he had the militia, who he would try to maneuver in lines. Didn't work out terribly well. And so at Long Island, he sets up on top of a hill. He thinks, Washington, that the British will come straight up the hill and they'll get to gun him down. But once again, the British have learned. They go for his flank. And they do a thing called amusing the enemy, where they have some Germans come up in front, and while the Americans are paying attention to them, there's a British column hooking around their left flank. And they roll the army up. There are only 2 regiments in the whole army that are skilled with bayonets, and they do help with the withdrawal. People, there are times, I don't push religion, but there are times when you got to believe God was with us, because here's the army trapped on Long Island, should have been wiped out, and a fog comes in, and John Glover's Marbleheaders steal every boat in the neighborhood and get Washington out of there. He gets chased across, out of New York and across New Jersey. He does the raid at Trenton, so he gets to come back. In 1777, he'll again fight Howe at Brandywine. Again, he'll stand on a hill. The Hessians will amuse him while his flank gets cut. Washington, though, you've heard of the expression being promoted to your level of incompetence. Washington was promoted to his level of competence because he was an expert at strategy. And at the national policy level, there was nobody better. He knew we were going to need help. Guess who was going to help us? And the Spanish. Both of them were sore after the 7 Years' War. As early as 1774, they saw there was trouble coming. And it's not that they were so hot for democracy, they were not. But they realized, oh, these guys could use some guns and some cannon and powder. So they were giving it to us because it was a way to mess with the British. The French will become our allies. The Spanish never became our allies, but they do fight. The reason they didn't become our allies is they didn't want their own colonies getting ideas, which they did in about during the Napoleonic Wars. So, and I mention this because it's an area of research we're only encountering lately. There are some really excellent books. One is Brother at Arms, and I strongly recommend it if you want to understand how the French and Spanish participated. The Spanish did, in fact, do military operations in Florida, and of course, every British soldier who was fighting them in Florida was not fighting Washington up north. So,
who were they fighting then? Oh, this French and Spanish.
Yeah, what the Spanish were attacking, first they attacked in the Mississippi Valley up to Baton Rouge, and then they worked their way along the Gulf Coast to Pensacola. Actually, the Spanish are the one army that I do not have represented in my little force here. So, Washington's been being defeated. Now he's at Valley Forge. He's lost Philadelphia. People are questioning his leadership. He manages to get past that. And he gets a guy named Baron von Steuben, who was not a baron and he was not a von. Well, self-promotion is a big thing in America. But he was good at it. He was also kind of a comic figure. He knew how to laugh and get the guys to laugh with him. One of his comments was, though, in the Prussian army, if I say go do something, they go do it. Here I have to say why they have to do it. But what he does is he takes the manual, simplifies it, and he takes 40 guys, say this class here, trains them how to march and fight and work with bayonets. Each of you then takes a 40-man squad and trains them. Each of them then takes, so by the spring, Washington's army has been trained. They also are freshly uniformed. The British in Philadelphia are about to have some problems, and I'll go into more detail on that in a moment. With the French having come into the war, they can't hold Philadelphia and New York, so they decide to march across New Jersey to get back to New York. There is no reason for either side to have a battle other than they want to get it on. They do. On a 98-degree, highly humid day, guys are dying of heat stroke left and right. But after a failed attack, Washington does that thing that really tells you who a good commander is. He stops the rout, turns it around, and holds the British. The battle's considered a draw, but this is where the Continental Army makes its bones. From this point on, the Continental Army is a respectable force. They can take on the British one-on-one.
What was that battle called?
Monmouth Courthouse. Thank you.
What is it called?
Monmouth Courthouse.
Were their uniforms made of wool?
Yes. Yeah. However, Washington really preferred hunting shirts, which were made out of cotton, cheap, comfortable, easy to wear, and in the rain, that fringe that looks so pretty actually helps the rain drain away.
And all that fabric was hand loomed.
We didn't have fancy things like factory looms back then. Well, after Monmouth Courthouse, the war shifts into the South. And as mentioned earlier, we lose one army at Charleston. We lose another at Camden. Horatio Gates, who was always a kind of a pain in the neck to Washington, was the commander of that army. He set a world's record for how fast he ran away from that battle. Something like 60 miles in 24 hours. But from that point on, he had no reputation. They send Nathaniel Greene down there, and he's working with hardly anything at all. But he manages to fight a series of battles. He loses them all, but the British end up always with fewer and fewer soldiers and no way to replace them. He's essentially retreating to victory. And if you study the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, and I recommend Osprey's book on the subject, you'll see how skillfully the British fight that battle, how their tactics are absolutely perfect. But at the end of the battle, they have no supplies, they're worn out, they head for Wilmington, and then they head for Yorktown. And we know how that turned out. So, let's take a look at our armies. I said, well, let's start with the British. The thing Don cautioned me about was getting in front of the screen.
John, if you hit Alt-Tab on the computer, I think that'll switch us over.
I'll let you, you know what, I can do it from here. Guys, I gotta tell you, I'm not just old, I'm old school. They had to drag me into the computer age.
Kicking and screaming?
Mostly. By the way, Lexington and Concord. Notice the British light infantry in a nice line, and the Americans rather loosely ordered. If you ask me in a while, I'll share with you who I think fired first. Okay, so start with the British, since they're the guys we got to beat. As I said, typically, always 8 infantry companies, 1 grenadier company, 1 light company. Take a look around the room. The guys who are a little larger than average, they'd be in the grenadier company. Smaller than average, who are sharp, they'd be in the light company. Believe it or not, they said they could shoot well. How well can you shoot with a musket? Well, they were better at it. But they were also useful for assaults. On our side, the Americans. I'd like you to notice Smallwoods, Maryland here. Notice the red coats. What could possibly go wrong? They very quickly shifted to white hunting shirts. But I put this in here just to show, they captured British uniforms, but it turned out not to be a very good idea. Hazlitt's, Delaware, these 2 units were the first 2 units in the Army to be able to fight with bayonets. These guys in the stocking caps are fishermen. John Glover took all of his fishermen and put them in a regiment. There were black people in this regiment, and that actually caused a couple of brawls around Cambridge. Washington handled this very simply. He walked right into the brawl, grabbed 2 people. If their blood is red, they can fight. But where the Marbleheaders come in is every time Washington has his back to a river, they steal every boat in the neighborhood, get the Army out of trouble. When he needs to go to the attack at Trenton, they row him across the river. He then rows them back again so they don't get caught, and then he rows them back again a couple of days later for the raid on Princeton. And you'll notice I don't call these battles, I call them raids because they were hit and run. If Washington had tried to stand, he'd have lost everything he gained. This unit here is the 2nd Rhode Island. If you look closely, you'll notice they're almost all black. Rhode Island ran out of people for their army, so what they did is they said to blacks, if you want to join the army, we'll buy your freedom. They bought it at the going rate. They didn't cheat the slave owners. If you served for the war, you had your papers. This regiment turned out to be very tough, and dressed in linen and cotton, they fought at Yorktown, and they were part of the assault on the last redoubt. Legions. There was a peculiar formation in the Revolution called legions. It was a mixture of horse and foot. Lee's Legion is one of the most famous. They will help out in the South enormously. Very handy to have on your flank some light infantry backed by some cavalry. And then we have the South Carolina Regiment. They are looking very good. By the way, all these guys are looking very good compared to how they probably looked on the battlefield. You go out in the field, it gets a little tattery. Rifles, Morgan's rifles. But notice back here, and I encourage you to, after this is over, to come up and look closely because I know how well you can see from all the way back there. Our Dearborn's light infantry with bayonets to keep them out of trouble. And then we have the French, who actually did send an army to help us out. And ultimately, they're half the force at Yorktown. Their navy manages to take on the British and make the victory at Yorktown happen. And they did it in a strangely French way. They didn't attack the British, they let the British attack them. And when the British didn't succeed, they had to go back to New York. By the time they got back from New York, Cornwallis had surrendered. This was the second time the French had done that. They pulled a stunt like that at Minorca during the 7 Years' War. On the British side, there were also the Loyalists. People, I have to admit, I have a certain loving for the Loyalists because these guys were people who liked order the way it was. They weren't going to burn their house down in the name of liberty. They kind of thought that was a little strange. But a couple of things bad. First of all, the British didn't respect any American, so they missed an opportunity here. They put them in green coats, which was another way of letting them know how inferior they were. It wasn't until the last years of the war, when the French were starting to intervene, that they really make a serious effort, and by that time it's a little late. And then we have the Native Americans. Now, the Indians, who are totally undisciplined. They're warriors. The difference between a warrior and a soldier is a warrior is fighting for personal glory. He wants to be alive after the battle to tell how wonderfully he did. So are they going to stand in a serious fight? Not likely. And they have some rather bad after-battle habits. This guy here, when you look closely, if you look closely, this guy was the Wyandotte Panther. He was supposed to escort Jane McCrae to meet her lover.
Show it to the camera.
Ah.
You can't really see it. You can't see it. Here, put it in my hand.
Thank you, dear.
And can you get that?
Can we close in on that? Anyway, he arrived with Jane McCrae's hair, but without the rest of her. And one thing our colonial people, our rebel people were, is expert propagandists. I'm not used to working with this, as you can tell. This turned into a huge thing, and the colonial propagandists, this beautiful blonde angel of a woman, despoiled by this savage from the devil. She was probably brunette, probably not particularly good looking, of no particular accomplishments, but she causes all this militia to turn out for Saratoga. What does the militia do? They cut off all supplies. So in this sense, they were very useful. Thank you very much. By the way, we do have a sense of humor when we do these troops. My friend Terry Shockey actually painted a Cleveland Indians symbol on the breechclout of one of them.
You said they cut off all supplies. They cut off all supplies to the Indians or
To the British. Well, and the Indians, basically, because they couldn't get anything, they just went home. So the Indians are terribly unreliable, and they make a horrible mistake. They come in on the side of the British. So when peace is made, they're left to our tender mercies. And we saw how that turned out.
How are the Indians incentivized to be on the side of the British?
Gifts.
Thanks.
Yeah, they always want to know, what are you going to give us today? Well, you haven't given us anything lately.
And the British won the last war.
So then we have the Germans, who we commonly call Hessians. There were 6 different little German countries that sent troops here, and they're frequently called mercenaries. They were not. Mercenaries fight for their own profit. The soldiers in these regiments were being paid by their ruler. They didn't get any extra money for fighting in America. It was a regiment system. So the English would make a deal with the elector of Hesse-Kassel for so many regiments. There'd be extra money if one got wounded, even more money if one got killed. But they were expected to fight. They were very good. They actually, as the war went on, got better. The Brunswickers, who I've put out here, who went along with the Saratoga campaign, we have a letter from von Rittesel where he talks about being able to move his lines through the woods. So it sounds like he was doing the same thing Howe did, figuring out how to handle the woods. The Germans also had a kind of soldier called a Jäger. The Jäger carried rifles. Jäger means hunter in German. And these were guys who were hunters. They wore green coats, which of course is entirely appropriate. All I can say is they were very good. But at the same time, America had its effect. 6,000 of them stayed here at the end of the war. Did not go back to Germany. One way they maintained discipline was there were consequences for your family if you misbehaved here. Yeah. Economic. I don't know all the details, but yeah, they could be tossed out of the place they lived, things like that. It's good to be king, not so good to be a peasant.
So you would not want to desert? You would stay and fight?
Well, except for, yes, they did. At the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, Nathaniel Greene said, "Our army of British deserters fought their army of American deserters." Okay, let me sidestep a little there. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. The first year of the war, the spirit of '76, is when Americans are fighting out of patriotism, and these are the farmers around Boston like that. But they go home to their farm whenever they need to. How can you run an army that way? There comes a point after '76 where the soldiers on all sides are just, well, the same guys go into each army. Down and outers, somebody who's got a problem with a judge who's given a choice, since a lot of the punishments in those days involved neck work. Guys who had maybe made a mistake with a girl, had made some other mistake, these guys get in the army. Or maybe just some farm boy who goes to a beating up. A beating up was where they were recruited by having a drum outside of a bar or a pub, and here's how wonderful it is to join the army. And here's Sergeant Carter in his dress uniform, and he takes this guy and fills him full of gin to where he doesn't even know what he's talking about, pushes a shilling into his hand, the king's shilling, and he's now got a new career for the next 25 years. But once these guys were in the army, they were drilled ferociously. Sergeant Carter had a cane, and he was okay to use it. And if you fought back, you could end up being flogged. And I don't know how much you know about flogging, but 12 lashes will make your back look like a cooked steak. Or there was the horse, 2 boards like this. You're sitting like that all day long. Not a great way to spend the day. There's always one more thing, isn't there? Always good to check the notes. All right. Last thing about the militia. The militia really did serve a useful purpose. The Americans, the rebels, were very smart. They managed to get their people in charge of the militia. So that meant the Americans had armed people all over the place who could prevent the loyalists from coming together effectively. It was kind of like trying to be a Crips in a blood neighborhood. Or actually, it'd be the other way around since Crips wear blue. So that was another way the loyalists kind of lost traction. The other piece, too, was New Jersey, after the New York campaign, it had been a Tory stronghold. But basically, the Hessians and the British raped and pillaged their way across New Jersey. And then they left after Trenton, leaving the people in New Jersey to the tender mercies of the Continentals. You know, people remember this stuff. So the British really weren't that good at hearts and minds, I'm sorry to say. Attitudes about that. Lord Rawdon, who was supposedly the ugliest man in America, and a very skilled commander, wrote a letter he thought was very humorous, and I hope this isn't too disturbing. Our soldiers have just received a shipment of meat, and they've become riotous as satyrs. In other words, they're chasing women. And a maid cannot go into the bushes in safety. And they don't bear it with the resignation that they ought, with the result that we have the most interesting court-martials every Monday. That was supposed to be witty. It curls my hair every time, well, what's left of it every time I say it. Okay.
You mean they got caught because of the court-martials on Monday?
Well, they got caught, and then there was a court-martial on Monday. Usually, you know, get caught, get indicted, get convicted. You know, it's a cycle that's been going on for a very long time. So, Concluding remarks. I believe that everybody who fought in the revolution was a patriot in their own mind. Loyalists certainly didn't feel there was anything out of line with doing what he'd always done, supporting the king. Certainly king and country were what the British Army was about. This business of being an auxiliary, there was a long tradition of that. Actually, this was the last war that you see that kind of thing. The Native Americans, well, like I said, after that, they were out of luck. The last point, the Americans go home, and they find themselves not being very welcomed because they're trying to displace people who got jobs. Same thing happened after the Civil War. God and the soldier, we alike adore, but only when in danger, not before. The danger over, they're alike requited. God forgotten and the soldier slighted. Still goes on. The French go back. Louis XVI has spent a lot of money on this war, and now he tries to tax his people to pay for the war. And we have a revolution over there. We are very fortunate. I can't tell you how fortunate. The history of revolutions is that the army that wins the revolution steals it and puts its commanders in charge. And the Congress had sworn their honor, their lives, and their fortunes. And yet here the army is starving. A bunch of officers got together in Newburgh, and they were going to go down and straighten Congress out. Washington comes in, and he says, men, what can you possibly be thinking? What have we sacrificed for? What have we died for? The Congress is trying to straighten this out. Allow me to put on my glasses while I read you their letter, for I've grown both blind and gray in the service of my country. Not a dry eye in the house. Killed the conspiracy on the spot. If you haven't guessed, Washington is a real hero of mine. Always comes down on the side of the country. Always. Didn't want to go to the Constitutional Convention. Knew that it wouldn't work if he wasn't there. Didn't want to be president. Knew they wouldn't pass the Constitution if they didn't know he'd be pres. So, and by the way, the press abused him just like they do every other president. Which is why he went to 2 terms. Questions? Questions? Yes, sir.
Was there retribution against the loyalists after the war?
Very much so. Your property was not safe. You were kicked out of the country. In fact, in the War of 1812, we think we're going to invade Canada, where we're going to run into French Catholics, and we're an anti-Catholic country, and loyalists from the Revolution. We were so welcome. And actually, that's where Canada starts building its own identity. Loyalists also went down to the Caribbean. A number of them actually went to England, and Benjamin Hollowell became one of Nelson's best captains. There were others who, yeah, retribution is always nasty. Our histories tend to kind of blacken the reputation of loyalists. Like I've mixed in with the Indians here, Butler's Rangers, who, along with the Indians, participated in the Wyoming Valley and Cherry Valley massacres. There's a guy named Thomas Burnfoot Brown. Got his name because he was tied to a tree, scalped, covered in tar, his feet were set on fire. He seems to have been a little sore about that. And he formed a Tory unit, and he definitely did payback. But in our books, of course, he's doing all these horrible things. Always depends on what side you're on. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if people know that George Washington's coat of arms was 500 years old when he was alive. It went back to the Magna Carta.
A foundational point in our history.
He was in training to be a soldier when he was 12, at least, maybe when he was 4. I don't know, you know what I mean. So, as many here.
And the funny thing is, his education stopped when he was 15. And yet, you read his writings, you hear what he said. An amazing man. I wish we had something like that today.
And what a lot of people don't realize is he was an incredible dancer.
And there was some kind of a joke around the fact that after the revolution, he raised mules. He actually asked the King of Spain for a mule. And the king wasn't willing to send a prize one, but he sent something over. And so Washington's just happy as a clam, raising mules, hanging out with Martha. They never produced children, unfortunately. Probably smallpox meant that he wasn't able. I've oftentimes wondered what it would have been like to be George Washington's son. Yeah. Just because the son of a powerful man is almost invariably kind of not doing so well.
Articles of Confederation, what happened?
Articles of Confederation basically, okay, step back a little. The real Declaration of Independence was when each colony threw out its charter and wrote their own constitution. The Declaration of Independence was saying that we're a country so we can borrow money. And so we write these Articles of Confederation that do not put any power in the central government. They're dreadfully afraid of a powerful central government. But things aren't working. And we're very aware that the Indians out on the northwest frontier are actually becoming quite dangerous. What are we going to do? We need an executive. But if you read the history of the Constitutional Convention, they are constantly afraid of an overly powerful executive. Gee, I can't wonder where they got that thought. We inherited from England. We inherited the fear of Cromwell. It was part of our heritage. So, yeah, it just didn't work.
Other question is, percentage of the signers of the Declaration of Independence that lived through and lived to the end of the Revolutionary War?
I don't know. Good question. So, yeah. You know, actually, Bob brings up a great point. Bob and I are fellow parishioners, I'm proud to say. Here I am, 77, and I'm still learning. And sometimes I'm learning that what I learned, maybe I need to check that out. It's just the way it is. Small personal story. When I was in 10th grade, I wrote a paper on the Battle of Salamis. Some years later, I agreed to do the Greco-Persian War for my son's class. And it just happened that I'd gotten a couple of fairly new books on it. It was like, God, I didn't know a darn thing. And by the way, you'll notice that I've spoken fairly positively of the British here. This does not in any way discredit the Americans. The fact that we finally won says everything you need to know. We finally got the job done. With a little help from our friends. Other questions, please. Yes, ma'am.
So what happened to all the signers of the Declaration who lost everything and, you know?
Again.
I don't know, what happened to them? If you lose everything, what do you do after it's over?
Well, and we still had debtors' prisons in America. But on the other hand, the guys who signed the Declaration tended to be pretty well-to-do.
Yeah.
And the well-to-do tend to do pretty well for themselves. Okay.
So can you survive scalping? I didn't know you could survive that.
Yeah, there were people in the Old West who had some rather strange-looking hairdos. Yeah, by the way, I feel very good if I was ever in an Indian fight because they wouldn't be very interested in me. But on the other hand, I'm sorry, Carol, you've heard this many times. God, in her wisdom on the 8th day, checked men's heads and found some heads that were not perfect and covered those up with hair. It's a somewhat rare translation. Allow me to plug Dave Manley. Dave, raise your hand, please. Dave will be doing Kings Mountain. Now, this is a case where it's American militia against Tory militia, really. And the American militia are the over mountain men who are definitely tougher breed of militia. Dave has done a ton of research, and they've created, he and another member of the club have created an actual diorama of Kings Mountain. So it'll be time well spent, I assure you.
I was going to throw out one other thing. Somebody asked the question, why did the Indians fight with the British? For the most part, they fought because the British told them that they would stop the colonial advance at the Appalachian Mountains. So the Indians would have free reign of everything else. And they felt that if they won, that they would be protecting their world.
After the 7 Years' War, we thought, actually we call it the French and Indian War, It went on 9 years because Washington started it 2 years before the war. The rest of the world got to war. And Washington had land west of the Appalachians. A lot of these people had land. They thought they were going to go out there. And so the king does the proclamation of 1763, so it says, no, you don't get to cross the mountains. Now, of course, being good Americans, we obeyed.
But it's in the Declaration of Independence. Like, the king wouldn't let us go get land.
Right, right.
He protected it from the savages. That's what he called them.
But they were regarded as spawn of the devil.
I have
Cass.
a question on the French and Indian War. You know, I used to think of George Washington as kind of perfect, but did he have bounties to collect money when there were scalpings? Did he have policies, you bring me from the Indians that sided with us, you bring me this many, and I will pay you?
I don't know if he did that. I'm pretty sure that with some of the politically correct writing these days, they'd have got all over that. I mean, with the way they're giving him heat about having had slaves. But the answer is I don't know.
But one thing is, Washington approached the British to try and become an officer within the British Army, and they rejected him. He participated with General Braddock in a move out towards Ohio, and Braddock's total column was decimated by Indians and French, and that was a big learning experience for Washington.
He actually managed to help with the withdrawal. The people who got out largely because of Washington. And that this was all before the declaration of the 7 Years' War. In the American colonies, there was just this constant strife going on between the different colonies, the Spanish, the French, and the British, and it could be kind of nasty. Actually,
Recent movie, Young Washington.
I need to see that.
It was fabulous, and it covers, this is all pre-Revolutionary War. This is the French and Indian War primarily, but it shows how, like Washington started the war, and it goes into how the life in the plantation wasn't his, that he got from his brother, and all this other, many things.
Yeah.
Very good movie.
There was a Mount Vernon. Well, Lawrence Washington was one of Admiral Vernon's sailors, hence Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon, Admiral Vernon invented grog. It got its name because he wore a grogram cloak. So, and it was a mixture of rum and water. They thinned it with water, hopefully, so the guys would quit falling out of the rigging.
Question for you.
Please.
Washington is often depicted wearing the white British powdered wig. I'm sure he didn't wear that in battle, did he?
That's a good question. Well, the thing is, don't forget, these guys believed in dressing for the occasion. One thing that's kind of interesting is so many of the soldiers were illiterate, and germs hadn't been discovered yet, and yet they knew to wash their bodies and their uniforms before a battle. Because that musket bull might drive a lot of cloth in there, create an infection. And I mean, the solution was if you got hit in the arm, cut it off, got hit in the leg, cut it off, got hit in the head.
Yeah.
Did they know germs would cause infection back then? I don't think so.
What they did is they called it bad wounds. They had bad pus and they had laudable pus coming out of the wound. Laudable was clear, bad smelled bad. And they actually called it that. Can you imagine your doctor? You go to see the doctor, oh, you have laudable pus. Or
They didn't really discover germ theory until about the middle of the Civil War.
right. And even in the Civil War, I mean, you look at the sanitary business. When I did my Civil War presentation, I always started off with a picture of a Civil War hospital, a barn, and the guys in the barnyard waiting to be operated on. So.
Surgeons used to hone their knives on their boots, which...
Yes, sir.
There were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 47 survived the war.
Thank you. Thank you.
9 signers died before the war formally ended in 1783.
But there were still great sacrifices for those that were, many of those that were lost.
Well, understand,
None of the 56 were killed directly
yeah,
or executed by the British.
which, by the way, the last rebellion the British had faced was the 45, and leaders where Scotland tried to rebel, and people from that were hung, drawn, and quartered. So when Benjamin Franklin said we must all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately.
Is that when we stopped, or I don't know, did we ever practice hanging, drawing and quartering, which is?
As far as I know, it only happened once in New York, and it was a guy who shouldn't have been convicted, but he got to be on the short end of the power struggles, and he was hung, drawn, and quartered. It was quite a while before the Revolution, though.
Okay, I just want to mention that that occurred more recently in the last year or so in South Korea for the schoolmaster who told the truth about the current South Korean president or prime minister. Okay, that's what happened to the headmaster that told the true history of the man who's in charge of South Korea, the communists.
South Korea is, let's just say they're a little rough.
Well, this was not done by the South Koreans. This was done by the communists that's taken over South Korea.
What,
Yes.
you mean North Korea?
South Korea is now controlled by a man who supports communism. Yes, South Korea. If you look it up and
I will have to check that out.
Doug Frank has informed us of this.
No.
I think
Other questions?
he had a question.
Yes.
The gentleman over there. Oh, well, you had raised your hand.
Yes. Recruiting.
Mhm.
Did the regulars recruit from the Tories, or did they do any regular recruiting directly from the population when they were in America?
They take anything they could get. The thing is, these regiments are about 400 strong. They should be about 600 strong. And that tells you something about how popular the war was. Another problem for the British is their really good generals didn't want to come here. There was a second regiment of light dragoons. Their commander was dissatisfied after a little while, and he went home. So they actually lost one of their regiments just because their own people weren't willing to fight.
The British or the...
You know what? It appears that we are a little bit beyond our time. Your patience was amazing, and thank you very much for coming today. Now, I'm going to be up here. I invite you to come up, take as long as you want, checking all this out. Last point. These miniatures are all an inch tall. No, I am no good at painting human beings. I had a very good friend who unfortunately is up in miniature heaven, and he was very good at that, and he gave me a teacher's rate. So we went from a 400-man army back in 90 to what it is now. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, John. So, a couple of points here, too. These miniatures that you see here, one of these days we're going to have to do a talk about the CMH Club, Colorado